3 decades, family, stability, sacrifice, all for them. But when a celebration meant to honor your life turns into a public execution, it's more than just a ruined evening. It's the point of no return. They built the trap, filmed the verdict, and handed it to you. The sons you once carried on your shoulders, now your judges. The woman you once shared bread and shelter with, now the narrator of your downfall. And all of it, to the applause of those who once knew you as a man of honor. But sometimes, to be reborn, you have to burn to the ground. Because when they've taken everything, your name, your family, your dignity, there's only one thing left to do: rise from the ashes, coldly, precisely, without a sound, every step, calculated, every word, a strike. You're no longer their father, not a husband, not even the man whose name they tried to erase. Now, you are the feather in the storm, and everything they stole will be returned, just not the way they expected. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now let's get started. The wind whispers through the trees as I sit alone in my car on a Saturday evening, hands clenched tight around the steering wheel. I'm resisting the urge to lash out, to slam my fist against the dash. Inside me, a storm brews. Anger, humiliation, betrayal, and a deep, gnawing sorrow that refuses to settle. This night was meant to be a celebration. My 50th birthday, the golden mark of 5 decades. A lifetime of hard-earned stability, unyielding effort, and quiet sacrifice, all meant to culminate in a moment of joy. Instead, I was ambushed in front of people who've known me half my life. Let me rewind. The name's Elias Whitmore. At least that's what my driver's license says, for now. I was raised in Houston, but moved north to a smaller town when Bianca, my ex-wife, insisted she needed a change of scenery. We were married for nearly 2 decades, raised 3 boys together. But 8 years ago she decided my steadiness wasn't enough. Being the man who showed up every day, who worked without complaint, who shielded our family from hardship, apparently, that wasn't the kind of love she wanted anymore. I've always kept to myself, a man of routine, the type who believes in earning your place, in parenting with structure, but also with heart. I never claimed to be flawless. Who does? But I gave what I could. Still, if you ask my sons, I either gave too much or never enough. Depends on which one you ask. There's Silas, 29 now, then Flynn, 26, and Dorian, the youngest, 23. Over time, they've come to see their mother as the one who gets them, fun, lighthearted, forgiving. Me? I've been reduced to the guy who signs checks, a surname on their mail, a bank account they dip into. That's been my function. Tuition, emergencies, bailouts. Even after Bianca, I parted ways. When Dorian was barely out of middle school, Flynn still finding his footing, and Silas just starting adulthood, I believed I'd remain their father in more than just biology. But tonight crushed that belief. It began with a call from Silas 3 weeks back. "We've been talking, Dad," he said. "We want to throw you a 50th birthday party. You've earned it." I almost dropped the phone. For the last 10 years, our interactions had been strictly business. They reached out when they needed something. Flynn's debt from bad bets, Dorian's education bills, Silas drowning in expenses. But this sounded sincere. I set aside my hesitation and told him I'd be honored. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally shifting. Maybe they were starting to see me beyond the role of provider. Maybe the divorce no longer poisoned every memory. I clung to that hope. And so, here I am, gripping the steering wheel like a rope pulling me from the edge, blinking back the sting of tears after what went down. Because that party? It was a setup. They rented out a back room at a local brewery. I walked in to find about 30 familiar faces, friends, neighbors, old colleagues. It felt warm at first. Then Silas tapped his glass. "We've got something special for Dad's big day," he said. The lights dimmed. A projector kicked on. I braced for nostalgia, baby photos, inside jokes, harmless jabs. But that's not what they had planned. Bianca's voice came through the speakers, crisp and detached, like a documentary host narrating a crime. Elias Whitmore, disappointing husband, disappointing father, disappointing man. A ripple of uncertain laughter moved through the room, the nervous kind people use when they're not sure if it's safe to laugh. But the mockery didn't stop. Slide after slide, they aired my so-called shortcomings, my old beater of a car that barely made it through the winter, the deck I started but never finished. Each image was a calculated jab, each word a wound. Then came the part that hollowed me out. Bianca's voice shifted. She began dissecting our marriage. Calm, scripted, cutting. "He never fulfilled me. I faked it for most of our relationship," she said. "That's why I left." I went numb. Silence swept through the room, broken only by scattered gasps and suppressed chuckles. Eyes turned toward me, some filled with pity, others with barely masked amusement. No one intervened. No one shut it down. My sons stood there like statues, letting it unfold. And then, the final strike. The video ended with the three of them on screen, shoulder to shoulder. Silas looked directly into the camera. "We've decided to change our last names. We'd rather be fatherless than be tied to someone who was never really there." I waited for the joke to end, for someone to shout that it was all in fun. It never came, just silence, 30 people frozen in awkward complicity. I stood, cleared my throat, managed, "Thanks for coming." Then I left, walked away from the ashes of that night. That's how I found myself parked behind a closed-down hardware store, engine running, night pressing in. My phone won't stop lighting up. Bianca, the boys, they want my signature to legally change their names. The irony is sharp. After all these years, after everything I've given, they still need something from me. My name. I stare at the screen until the ache gets too close to the surface, then power it down. My chest is tight, my throat raw, but I won't cry. Not for them, not anymore. They clearly never understood this about me. I don't shatter easily. The days that follow, I vanish. I call in sick, take time off. Something I've never done. I retreat to the quiet of my small house, the one Bianca used to call too cramped. I sink into the silence, spending hours in the living room, eyes locked on the mantel above the fireplace. One photograph draws me in. The 5 of us, years ago, camping. The boys are still young. I'm crouched near the grill, fiddling with a fuel tank, trying to get dinner going. Bianca stands off to the side, her smile faint, gaze already drifting elsewhere. Even back then, it was written in the picture, I was doing the work, and she was already gone. Silas's grin stretched wide, 2 front teeth missing and all. Flynn's hands were sticky with melted marshmallow, and Dorian was barely visible, wrapped up to his nose in a blanket. They looked happy in that picture, or so I used to convince myself. But for the last 8 years, a persistent, suffocating guilt has followed me, the kind that settles deep and refuses to let go. I'd convinced myself that I could make things right, by paying their bills, bailing them out of tight spots, always stepping in when Bianca short. That was my pattern. If something broke, I fixed it, and that included people, especially my sons. So I kept showing up, even when it emptied my wallet and drained my spirit. But after that birthday party, something inside me gave way. I realized I couldn't keep letting them walk all over me. Later that same day, sitting alone in my living room, I took out a pen and paper and began a list. I cataloged every major favor, every financial rescue, every moment I'd swooped in. Silas, now 29, had leaned on me for half his mortgage for 3 straight years. They live in a sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood they can't actually afford. $1,200 a month. That's what I shelled out just to keep them from drowning. Flynn, 26, is deep in a gambling hole. I've pulled him out more times than I care to count. Once for 8 grand, another time for 5, and a trail of smaller loans I lost track of long ago. Dorian, the youngest at 23, was left without tuition help when Bianca's money dried up. I covered the remainder of his education costs, plus rent and food, just to keep him from having to work full-time while in school. The total price? Enough to wreck my savings. Not that I'm rolling in it. I live simply, scraping by, pouring every available cent into their needs. If they'd at least shown me some gratitude, if their resentment had come with a shred of recognition, I might have endured it. But that night, when they humiliated me in front of a crowd, throwing out personal details like confetti, that was the breaking point. That's when I started planning. And if that paints me as petty, then fine. Sometimes the only way to open someone's eyes is with a brutal wake-up call. The texts and missed calls piled up afterward. I ignored them at first, let the silence stretch, and only picked up once I'd decided on my next move. It was Silas who finally got through. "Dad, come on. We need to talk. You can't just vanish like this," he said. I exhaled slowly, my voice unsteady. "I don't know, Silas. I'm still trying to process what happened. That party caught me completely off guard." He went quiet. Maybe he expected me to lose my temper, but I didn't. So he pushed ahead. "Look, we were just being honest with you. Maybe it was a little harsh, but someone had to say it. And the last name thing, it's not a dig at you. Whitmore just doesn't fit us anymore." "Not about me?" My throat tightened, and my voice rose slightly before I caught myself. I kept it calm. "If that's really how you all feel, then I won't stand in the way." "Seriously?" He sounded surprised. "There are just a few documents we'd need you to sign, stuff that has to be notarized. Maybe we could grab dinner, talk it all through." His voice practically dripped with smug certainty. He thought he had me where he wanted me. I let him believe it. "Yeah," I murmured. "I'd like to make things right. Let's meet up." "Great," Silas said, sounding satisfied. "I'll let Flynn and Dorian know." He picked a trendy Italian place near his side of town, one of those overpriced joints where the pasta costs more than a week's worth of groceries. They'd never taken me anywhere like that before, unless they expected me to cover the tab. Classic move. I leaned into the role they'd cast me in, letting my voice shake a little when we spoke again, like I was broken, desperate, and ready to beg for forgiveness. They didn't suspect a thing. On Saturday night, I arrived in a wrinkled shirt I'd worn to bed. I hadn't shaved. My face was rough, my appearance disheveled, like I'd stopped caring entirely. The hostess greeted me with a practiced smile that barely hid her judgment. I told her I was with the Whitmore party, and she led me to a round table tucked into a corner. 5 seats. Bianca the boys were already there. Bianca gave me a tight little wave, her clothes hugging a body she clearly worked hard for, her perfume thick enough to sting the eyes. Dorian was glued to his phone, probably watching videos. Flynn tapped the table with his fingers, eyes darting around like he had somewhere more important to be. Silas stood as I approached, grinning like he used to after scoring goals in Pee-wee soccer. "Dad," he said, "glad you made it." I gave a slow nod. "Yeah, thanks for having me." Bianca pursed her lips into a strained look of concern. "We're just trying to help, Elias. We want you to face some truths, with us together." Truths. The word nearly made me laugh, but I bit it back. I took my seat, feeling the curious stares from nearby diners. They could sense the awkward energy radiating off our table. The waitress arrived for drinks. I asked for water. No wine, no scotch, not tonight. I wanted my mind to cut through the noise with precision. Silas stepped up to take charge. "Dad, what we did at the party, it was intense, yeah," he said. "Maybe it felt brutal, but we had to jolt you awake. You weren't seeing the reality. I gave a slight nod, my gaze drifting downward. I didn't understand how far things had slipped, I confessed. Dorian finally glanced up from his phone, his expression carefully arranged to mimic regret. Honestly, Dad, when we needed someone emotionally present, you weren't there. It was always Mom who paid attention, who actually gave a damn, he added. That video, it wasn't an attack. It was the only way we knew how to show you the weight we've carried for years. Bianca leaned across the table and gently rested her hand on mine. Elias, it's time you acknowledged it. You never really put effort into our marriage. I felt like I didn't exist to you, so I had to find happiness somewhere else. That was private, I said softly, eyes fixed on the immaculate white tablecloth. Bringing it up in front of everyone crossed a line. She gave a small shrug, completely unbothered. They deserved to know, and so did you. Flynn leaned forward, his voice steady and clipped. This wasn't just about you and Mom. You've always been the tough guy, the one providing. But that wasn't enough. You were never truly there. You didn't take the time to learn who we are or what mattered to us. Every sentence landed like a well-aimed blow. Still, I held my composure, presenting the picture of a man properly chastened. I'm sorry, I said, barely above a whisper. I mean it. They looked at one another, satisfied and smug. Bianca's mouth curled into a subtle smirk, clearly pleased with her orchestrated takedown. The waitress returned with our drinks, unaware of the battlefield she'd walked into. We placed our dinner orders. Silas chose some overpriced pasta topped with scallops. Bianca went with a seafood medley, shrimp and salmon. Flynn and Dorian both ordered top-tier steak. I picked the cheapest pasta they had. While we waited, they kept up the assault. Silas launched into a monologue about how growing up without a strong male role model left him floundering in adulthood, conveniently leaving out the part where I'd been silently paying half his mortgage for over a year. Flynn took his turn, accusing me of lacking emotional depth, of being someone he never felt safe confiding in. Dorian added his voice, listing off all the baseball games I skipped, the father-son moments we never had. I listened in silence, letting them tell their version of the story. To them, I was either the cold authoritarian or the distant ghost. Bianca would occasionally chime in, painting their narrative with embellishments and outright lies. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her. I simply kept my head bowed, playing the role they wanted, a defeated father, stripped of dignity. Then the real purpose of the evening was finally laid bare. Flynn cleared his throat. Dad, about the name change paperwork. There's a deadline. We just need your signature, confirming you won't dispute it. The court needs your approval. Bianca leaned in, voice soft with rehearsed compassion. This isn't meant to hurt you further. The boys just want a fresh start. I nodded slowly, stomach churning. If that's what you all believe is best. Silas lit up with relief. Dad, really, thank you. That means a lot. Our food arrived then, giving me a brief reprieve to gather myself. My hands trembled just enough to maintain the illusion. The conversation lost momentum, replaced by clinking silverware and awkward silence. Once the dishes were cleared, just before dessert, they laid out the documents like a dealer spreading cards. I signed every page they pointed to, committing each signature to memory. At one point, I paused. You're absolutely sure this is what you want? Once this is done, there's no reversing it. Dorian hesitated, but Silas and Bianca gave firm nods. Flynn avoided my eyes, his throat tightening as he swallowed. So I signed the final page. A young waitress came by, collecting plates. Her eyes briefly flicked to the heavy silence blanketing the table. When the check came, Silas slid it toward me without missing a beat. I took out my wallet and paid the nearly $200 bill, tacked on a generous tip, still keeping up appearances. I left that restaurant carrying the full weight of their judgment. But beneath the tired expression, something colder had begun to stir. Because the second I got home, the real plan began. Mortgage assistance? Finished. I opened my banking app and shut down the $1,200 monthly transfer to Silas without a second thought. Dorian's tuition payment? I'd just mailed the check. I called the bank and canceled it immediately. Flynn's safety net? I was his last line between solvency and collapse. I blocked his number and flagged his account to watch for any unauthorized attempts to reach my funds. I wasn't naive about what would happen next. I wanted to watch their righteous anger crack when the financial lifeline vanished. It didn't take long. By the end of the week, I had 13 voicemails from Silas. The last one was a storm of panic and fury. "Dad, you can't just cut us off. The bank's threatening foreclosure. Elena's freaking out. We have a meeting tomorrow with the mortgage company. You're destroying everything." Dorian started sending me an onslaught of screenshots, warnings from his university about overdue tuition payments. Right after that, he'd follow up with vicious jabs. "You're proving what a worthless piece of trash you are. Really? Doing this to your own son?" Flynn, who I'd already blocked from calling, borrowed someone else's phone just to leave me a voicemail. His voice dripped with contempt. "Nice going, Dad. If the guys I owe money to beat the crap out of me, that's on you. Want to see me land in a hospital bed? Or worse, just keep ignoring me?" Not one of them seemed even slightly remorseful about the public shame they'd dragged me through. Instead of reflection, they doubled down, demanding I return to being their walking ATM. Their entitlement had gotten louder, but I wasn't surprised. I'd been their emotional and financial punching bag for so long, they assumed I'd keep taking the hits without flinching. The day after Flynn's pitiful guilt trip, I decided I was done playing that part. I started gathering the evidence, every desperate message about gambling debt, every transaction marked poker bailout, every shameful receipt of his mess. Then, I made a new email under a name he wouldn't recognize and sent it directly to his fiancée, Marina. The subject line read, "What your fiancé hasn't told you." A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Marina stood there, eyes swollen, cheeks tear-streaked, gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She looked me in the eye and asked if what I sent was true. I met her gaze and said plainly, "I won't lie to you. Every bit of it is real." She gave a small nod, whispered a shaky, "Thank you," and turned to leave. Later, I heard she packed up and left him that same day. Good for her. Flynn went nuclear. My phone lit up with a barrage of furious voicemails and texts, blaming me for wrecking his life. He called me unstable, cruel, a cold-hearted bastard. I just scrolled through the ranting, muttering under my breath, "Cold? Sure. But where was your compassion when you humiliated me in front of everyone I know?" But the biggest surprise came from Bianca. She filled my inbox with frantic texts, pleading with me to patch things up, insisting the boys were falling apart, and that I needed to stop being so resentful and think of the family. This, coming from the same woman who once stood up at my birthday party and made a cruel joke about my performance in bed for everyone to hear. The hypocrisy made my skin crawl. I didn't answer. Let them stew in the mess they made. For the first time in forever, I was sleeping soundly. No more jolting awake before dawn, panicked over how I'd cover the next catastrophe. My money wasn't swirling down the drain anymore. I could grocery shop without calculating every dollar. I even scheduled a dentist appointment I'd been avoiding for years. The sense of peace was real, but I still had one thing left to do. I needed closure, and they needed a dose of reality. So I sent a group text, "I want to make things right. Let's sit down and talk this through. Come by my place this weekend. Lunch is on me. Chinese." Replies rolled in almost immediately. Silas, "Thanks, Dad. I'm in. We need this." Flynn, "I'll come." Dorian, "Okay." Bianca, "We'll fix this, Elias." The eagerness practically oozed desperation. They clearly thought I was cracking, that the version of me they had manipulated for years was about to come crawling back. Perfect. Let them believe it. On Saturday morning, I cleaned the house top to bottom. My modest two-bedroom bungalow might not be flashy, but it was mine. I vacuumed the living room, scrubbed the kitchen counters, made everything tidy. It wasn't always meant to turn out like this. Bianca. I once talked about building a bigger place together, before that dream crumbled the moment she started hooking up with her CrossFit trainer. At 11:45 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Bianca arrived first, always early. She was dressed in sleek workout gear, her hair tied into a flawless ponytail, trailing her signature cloud of overpowering perfume. "Elias," she said, stepping inside, "I'm glad we're doing this. The kids are really hurting." I gave a slight nod. "Yeah, I'm sure they are. The food's on its way." I didn't invite her to sit, but she made herself at home on the couch anyway, crossing her legs like we were old friends catching up. By noon, all three boys had arrived, and none of them looked great. Dorian wore a crumpled hoodie, eyes red. Whether from crying or just plain exhaustion, I couldn't tell. Flynn looked like he hadn't brushed his hair in days, stubble creeping unevenly across his jaw. Silas's expression was so drained it seemed even caffeine wouldn't save him. Good. Maybe they were finally feeling the consequences of their choices. I set out paper plates, napkins, and disposable cutlery. When the delivery arrived, enough food to feed a small army, I laid it all out on the dining table. General Tso's chicken, lo mein, egg rolls, fried rice, beef and broccoli, crab rangoon, the full spread. "Help yourselves," I said. They each filled a plate and migrated to the living room like awkward guests at a strained family reunion. Bianca balanced herself on the armrest of a chair, idly stirring her hot and sour soup. Flynn kept sighing with theatrical flair. Silas bounced his knee like a jackhammer. Dorian didn't lift his eyes from the floor. I eased back into the recliner, balancing my dinner plate on my knees. For several minutes, the room was filled with nothing but the soft clink of utensils and the low hum of the HVAC. Then I cleared my throat. "I've got something I want to show you." All eyes lifted, part anticipation, part dread. I reached for my laptop and connected it to the TV with an HDMI cable. Bianca watched every move like a hawk. I navigated to a folder labeled Birthday Presentation and hit play. The screen lit up with a familiar montage, but this time the roles were reversed. What was once used to ridicule me now served as a mirror, turned back on them. Bianca's voice boomed from the speakers. "Elias Whitmore, failed husband, failed father, failed man." Photos of me, tired, defeated, unaware, flashed across the screen. Some I hadn't even realized existed. Then came Bianca's cruel commentary about our private life. Her voice, dripping with contempt, filled the room. I never looked away from my family. Flynn's jaw tightened, color rising in his cheeks. Silas froze, stunned, eyes wide. Bianca's face flushed crimson. Dorian gently placed his plate down, his eyes wet with emotion. The video concluded with their grand finale. The announcement that they'd all chosen to change their last names to Bianca's maiden name, a final public rejection of me. I closed the file. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint ticking of the HVAC. Bianca's voice was unsteady. "Why would you show us that? We lived it. We've apologized." "Have you?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because I don't remember a single word that sounded sincere. I just wanted you to see exactly what you did. That's the reason we're here today." I stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out 4 manila envelopes. The first one went to Silas. "This is a complete record of every mortgage payment I've made for your house over the past 3 years, month by month, totaling $43,200. You told your mother I only helped with the down payment. This tells the real story. There's also a letter in there confirming I won't be asking for reimbursement. But we're done now. From here on out, the house is your responsibility." His face went ghostly as he flipped through the documents. "Dad, I didn't know. I turned away before he could finish and handed the next folder to Flynn. This one has proof of every gambling debt I've paid off for you, and a registration form for a free online gambling recovery program. Whether you show up or not is your choice, but I'm done bailing you out. No more handouts, no more rescues. He rifled through the papers, face contorted with a mix of fury and shame. You told Marina? He barked. You've ruined my relationship. I stayed quiet. You did that yourself. Then I handed Dorian his envelope, the youngest of them all. Inside were receipts for every tuition payment I'd made quietly behind the scenes. Your tuition's paid for this semester. You won't get kicked out halfway through. But that's the last time I cover for you. From here, it's on you. Financial aid, scholarships, jobs. You're not a child anymore. Tears threatened in his eyes. Dad, I didn't come up with the idea. Silas did. Mom supported it. I just went along with it. I raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. You stood by. You participated. You changed your name. And you watched your mother tear me down in front of our friends. That was your decision, Dorian. You own it. Finally, I turned to Bianca. Her folder contained photos, private ones, of her and the CrossFit trainer she'd had an affair with, long before our divorce was official. Every image time-stamped. I'd kept them out of court for the kids' sake. She barely glanced at the photos before her face went pale. Was this really necessary? She whispered. You painted me as the villain, I said, my voice calm. Said I was boring, frigid, lousy in bed. Left out the part where you were sleeping with someone else while we were still married. Her eyes flared. Nothing happened until after I left you. Doesn't seem that way, I said, pointing at the timestamps. Still want to lie? Or are you ready to own up to it? Silas let out a shaky breath. Mom, is that true? Her face turned beet red. It wasn't what it looked like. Your father was cold, unreachable. It started as emotional. That's enough, I snapped. I'm done hearing your excuses. She slammed the folder shut, hands trembling. Whether from guilt or rage, I couldn't tell. I took a step back and looked each of them in the eye. I sold the house, my parents' house, the one you all just assumed you'd inherit. It's gone. The money's mine now, and I'm spending it on myself, not on children who treated my humiliation like it was sport. Flynn stood, face burning with anger. You can't do that. Grandma left that house to me, to us. It's done. The sale closed without a hitch. The money's already hit my account. I turned to face them. One final time. Oh, and since I was already in the mood for clean breaks, I went ahead and changed my name too. So, congrats. You got what you always wanted. The Whitmore name ends with me. You disowned it first. I just followed your lead. I've taken Mom's last name now. It's official. Papers signed, filed, stamped. The silence in the room was suffocating, thick, tense, as if the air itself wanted to escape. Silas tried to speak, fumbling for something to say. Dad, this wasn't how we thought things would turn out, he offered, voice shaking. Flynn's frustration cracked through his words. You're cutting us off because of that party? It was supposed to make a statement, one of them said, to show how much we were hurting. No, I said coldly, slicing through the excuses. That statement was a hit job. You didn't just embarrass me, you ambushed me. Then you slid those papers across the table, like I was a name to be deleted. You didn't want a dad, you wanted a fall guy. Bianca pushed to her feet, eyes blazing. Elias, this is outrageous. You're burning every bridge with your sons. They won't forget this, or forgive you. I laughed, bitter and empty. The sound echoed in the too quiet room. Forgive me? They've been nursing their grudges for years. Now they can hate me without needing my money. From the corner, Dorian choked on a breath, holding back tears. I didn't mean for it to spiral like this. I thought it was just a prank. It kept escalating. And what did you expect? I snapped. What did you think would happen when you all ganged up on me in front of everyone I know?" My voice shook, fury threatening to crack it in two. I'd never sworn at my kids, not once. But this time it came out like a bomb. It wasn't a fucking joke. That was my life, my reputation. You turned it into stand-up comedy. Silas's leg jittered restlessly. "Let's not do this. Let's just sit down and talk like adults," he suggested. "No," I said, firm as concrete. "I didn't bring you here for reconciliation. I showed you the video. I gave you the documents. That was the point, to draw the line. This is final." I glanced around the room. "There's food if you want it. Or don't. I honestly don't give a damn. When you leave, lock the door behind you." I grabbed my jacket, phone, and keys and headed toward the exit. "Where are you going?" Bianca called after me, voice clipped with panic. I stopped at the doorway, hand on the knob. "Lunch. With someone who actually treats me like I matter. We're going for a drive. I might even get lost on purpose. I won't be home till late. If you're still here, lock up." And then I left. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard Flynn explode. "This is bullshit!" followed by Bianca urgently whispering something about keeping their stories straight. I didn't stick around to hear more. I climbed into my car, old, a bit worn, but still dependable, and sat there for a moment. My heart was pounding, hands trembling. A voice in my head murmured that maybe I'd gone too far, that there'd be no coming back from this. But another voice, one I'd ignored for too long, reminded me I hadn't broken anything. They had. I just signed the papers on something they smashed years ago. I was just making it official. As I drove off, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Inside, I saw Bianca frozen, clutching the folder like it was a lifeline. Dorian was curled on the couch, face in his hands. Flynn stormed across the room, pacing like a caged animal, while Silas sat still, staring blankly at the mortgage paperwork. A sliver of guilt flickered in me. Just a sliver. What followed was something steadier, a strange, quiet peace. For once, I wasn't their target. That evening, I met Alyssa in a quiet park outside the city. We'd connected through a hiking group online. She was divorced too. Her adult kids still called just to say hello. When I got there, the confrontation was still buzzing through my veins. But she smiled when she saw me, soft, understanding. And I felt some of the tightness in my chest start to loosen. I didn't tell her everything, just said the day had been a mess. We walked and talked about trails we wanted to hike, the scent of spring trees, the sound of birds. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. The fallout came fast. Silas was drowning in mortgage debt. His wife, Elena, called me sobbing, asking for help. I told her it was between her and her husband, and hung up. Dorian filled my phone with texts, flipping between regret and blame. "You didn't have to tank my tuition," he wrote. I replied, "Get a job. Best of luck." Flynn did what Flynn always does. Rage, guilt trips, gaslighting. I blocked him. Again. Bianca played her usual hand, gossip, rumors about me having some midlife crisis. Relatives reached out, concerned, until I sent them the birthday video. That shut them up fast. After that, the silence was golden. When the name change processed, I felt something shift inside me. Lighter. I wasn't Elias Whitmore anymore. I'd reclaimed Brown, my mother's name, the only person who ever stood by me. If they didn't want the Whitmore legacy, neither did I. They could have that husk. I chose something true, something mine. It wasn't long before I crossed a major item off my personal bucket list. I finally made it to Yellowstone. Bianca always claimed that camping was beneath people like us. She couldn't have been more wrong. As I stood near the canyon's edge, the waterfall's spray catching the wind and brushing against my skin, I felt something I hadn't in years. A quiet clarity, a sense that life offered more than just the mess they dragged me through. That journey stirred something deep. I began to imagine more, the Tetons, maybe even the wilds of Alaska. I still had vacation days I'd never used, and for once, nobody was pulling me in any direction but forward. 2 months passed. Then, one evening after work, I turned into my driveway and saw Bianca's SUV already parked there. She stood with her arms folded tightly across her chest. My sons were on either side of her like sentries. I stayed in the car for a moment. Even though the mailbox now read E. Brown, they'd managed to find me. I stepped out cautiously. "What is this?" I asked. Silas spoke first. "We need you. Everything's falling apart. Flynn's a wreck. Dorian's thinking about dropping out of school. Mom can't hold it together." "Please, Dad," he added, his voice softer. I stared at them, hard. "You all remember what you did on my birthday? The way you humiliated me? Cut me off like I didn't exist?" I said. "And now you show up because you need something?" Dorian stepped forward, his eyes rimmed red. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "I went along with them. I just wanted you to be proud of me." A flicker of emotion passed through me, just enough to notice, but not enough to change anything. "It's too late for that, Dorian," I said. Flynn let out a bitter laugh. "You're being ridiculous. We came here to fix things." I cut him off. "Don't even start. You lied to Marina. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You burned through our savings on bets. And now you want me to just forget that and open my wallet?" Bianca stepped in. "They're still your sons." "No," I said. "They were your soldiers when you were trying to destroy me. You all turned your backs on me. Don't come here expecting me to clean up the wreckage." Her eyes narrowed, a quiet breath escaping her nose. "You've changed." "I had no choice," I said. They didn't budge at first, still holding on to the hope that I'd cave. Eventually, Silas said under his breath, "Let's go." Flynn turned, spat onto the concrete. "Screw you," he muttered. Dorian lingered for a second, glancing back. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. I didn't respond. I just walked inside and locked the door behind me. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.